This is Naked by the Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. Brought to you by Vladi Meško-Brestinska and Nectarios Lolios. And remember to subscribe, follow, and rate Naked to help us share it with the world.
Hello, and welcome to In Conversation with the Future Farm. Today we have Anu Shultes, and I'm super excited because this is going to take us into a very interesting direction because Anu has a really interesting story to tell. So welcome, Anu. How are you?
Good. Thank you very much for having me here, Nectarios. I'm excited to share some of my journey.
And your journey is really interesting, and I got excited because we had a prep conversation, and you shared so many different facets of what you've kind of achieved, what you've been through in your life. But with everything, there was a moment where I was sitting there going, surely not. There was this moment you're thinking, really, we're in the 21st century. We shouldn't be talking about this today. So with your permission, I would like us to explore some of these a little bit.
Yes, and trust me, actually, sometimes I feel the same way, but I'm also resilient, right? I accept things as they are. Like I try to teach them, but I try not to be shocked by it because, I'm now in my 50s and have been through a lot, just, from people, but also personally I've been through a lot. So it shaped who I am, right? Growing up in a different country, coming here with, without being eyes wide open, and then figuring out how life really is. Yeah.
Of course, we have a particular interest always in the Future Farm about the mental health challenges that people are facing and how they deal with them. But we also want to make sure that we kind of look at the different types of experiences that people are going through. And you mentioned coming here, we need to kind of also make it clear you're in the US, you're in the Bay Area. We can have a whole conversation about what it feels to be an immigrant, a migrant in a different country, to be an older person in an industry full of young people. It's like you can go so many different directions, but maybe just for the people watching and listening, maybe you tell us a little bit about just the headlines of your journey. Where did you start and how did you end up in the US? And I'll just interrupt because I think we'll have an easy conversation.
Okay, all right, no problem. So I grew up in India. I'm from Chennai. Well, I'm from Tamil Nadu, right? So I speak Tamil, but my dad worked for the central government, which means we go to these specials or government schools that teach English and Hindi as the first two languages. I'm sorry, my earbud this year just doesn't want to stay.
That's okay. If it doesn't want to stay and we just drop it, we don't use it. It's fine.
Okay. My school basically had English and Hindi as the first two languages, and then I really learned Tamil and even the reading, writing at home. Then my high school years were in Delhi because my dad got transferred a lot. My background is engineering. I actually got into what became IIT Roorkee back then. Back then it was just called Roorkee Engineering. And somehow my heart wasn't in it. So then when I got admitted to a good college, engineering college in Chennai, I switched after 2 months. I just literally said, okay, I'm going to give up on this and I'm going to go do that. So I graduated with computer engineering in 1990. And somewhere along the way, I decided I need to be in the US. I was very high on US being the land of opportunity where, everybody gets an equal chance. You can see where this is going. And I really felt like, even though I'm very proud of my heritage, I'm very proud to be Tamil, I'm very proud to be Indian, I'm a devout Hindu, I just felt like I was in a very patriarchal society that I needed to break free. So as a teenager, I decided when I graduate college, I'm going to go to the US for a master's degree because that was the best way I knew how to get to the US. So that's what I did. I studied for the GRE, I did well. I ended up in a program, it wasn't my first choice, but I ended up in a program in Cleveland. And that's where I met my husband. He's Caucasian. He and I, as far apart as we possibly could be, but turned out that we were close on values. And so, it wasn't some grand plan I had, but ended up making the decision to stay long-term because we got married when I graduated. He graduated a year before me. And so that's kind of how my journey in the US started. It was really education based. It was
Mm.
my drive to get out of the country because I really felt like US is a meritocracy and I could pretty much achieve whatever I want. It was, in a way, a hard landing. It was realizing that how I look mattered. I didn't realize that until, of course, I landed and I started interacting with people. And university is still a safe setting, right? An international student body, they're very welcoming. You don't necessarily feel like you're different. You just know that you're new and the people are supportive. What a great country. Then you get into what I call the real world when you get a job. And even then, I was in a supportive environment. I was at Pavilion where the CEO was, he's my personal mentor now. He's very well known. He's an Indian. He graduated from the same university. So he created a meritocracy of a company. And so I was still shielded in many ways. And then 8 years later, I had a child. My husband and I decided we need to move to Ohio. He had an offer in Ohio. And I said, you know what, I've been in a job for 8 years. I'm a VP. I have a $100 million budget. I'll be fine. I'll land, I'll get another VP job. My husband had just finished PhD. For him, it was his first real step up that he was looking for. And I said, you know what? It's time. It's time for me to follow him. And so Ohio I still love Ohio, right? That's where we met. Case Western is where we met. Still do love Ohio, but what I wasn't ready for is that breaking into the job market in Ohio as a 30-year-old who had been a VP with a master's degree was near impossible. Like I was told by leading banks, SVPs at leading banks, have you considered a job in IT? And it's very hard to get that answer when you are sitting in an interview and you're saying, hey, I had a team of 40 people. I had a budget of 150 million. I ran the front end process for one of the largest credit cards in the US, for a $10 billion company. And I, was not in the executive team, but I was a VP. I was just below the executive team. I had all this confidence and I realized that it didn't matter. It didn't matter to a lot of the companies in Ohio because they didn't see me as a VP. They saw me as an Indian woman asking for a job. And they said, hey, we think you fit in IT. And I don't even know how to explain that, right? Other than the obvious answer, which is at the time anyway, most Indians worked in IT jobs. But one of the other things I kept hearing as a refrain was, oh, if you want to be in management in Ohio, you need to have an MBA.
Right.
Yeah, you have experience, but you need an MBA. So I was pregnant with my second child, and I got angry and I said, you know what? I'll do the MBA. But it was already kind of late. It was like January, February. My daughter was due at the beginning of April. And I said, you know what? I'm going to sign up for the next GMAT. And I'm going to buy the GMAT book and I'm just going to study, and I have a 3-year-old and I'm like 8 months pregnant. I took the GMAT literally, and my daughter came early. Of course, I didn't know this was going to happen. I took the GMAT 4 days before I gave birth. And I aced it. I still remember the one question I missed because it was a computer format. So you could tell you had to give up to move on. And I said, wow, I should probably be able to get into any Ivy League school I wanted. My pride kicked in, right? Like, why? I need to show these people I'm better than them. And then I realized I just moved there. I had this newborn and I was kind of late for applications. And I was just like, I'm not going to uproot my family again. And my husband was just getting his feet, he was landing his feet in his new job. And so I went to the closest ranked institution. So I was in Cincinnati. My husband was a professor at the University of Cincinnati. Tuition would have been free, but Ohio State had a higher ranking. So as a mom of two, an infant and a 3-year-old, I drove 90 miles each way for 2 years to get my MBA in finance. And I picked finance because I felt like I've done marketing. I came on the analyst road on Pavilion. I built FICO score models. I'm like a super analyst. I did marketing. And I thought, finance is something I don't feel confident about. And around the time, my husband and I had discussed, and someday I want to be CEO. So I said, I have all these areas I need to master. I think it's a different approach women have versus men. My whole thing was, I'm going to create this whole plan where I'm going to master each one. So no one can tell me like, then I'm not good enough. So I went and did an MBA in finance. Second year, I actually became a TA. So I added even more commitments. And I graduated. It still bothers me. There were two courses. One was accounting and the other one was legal, where I got A minuses. Everything else was an A, and it still bothers me that I didn't hit the 4.0.
Can I just come in briefly, because I'm listening to you and it's literally like a high-speed train, right? So the story of going from India to the US to do something, the meritocracy piece, right? And then you tick all the boxes, right? You do everything right. You ace your exams. People tell you, we don't want you here. Maybe we would take you if you had an MBA. So you go and do the MBA, and it's all just to, the word that came to me when you said women are different from men in that, it's like you wanted to be bulletproof, right? So you wanted nobody to be able to scratch the armor, so you can claim your seat at the table.
Yes.
Right.
And then absolutely. And it's a hard realization, Victorious, that it doesn't guarantee a seat at the table at all. Like, it's just, you just realize over time that other people, and it still happens, it's fine. Other people find ways to do it better. The whole term white privilege, maybe, I don't know if it was coined, it certainly wasn't in my psyche. I still approached it as, I'm an immigrant. I've only been here, kid you not, I've only been here 10 years. I need to earn my stripes. I internalized that I need to work harder because I'm an immigrant. I wasn't necessarily thinking because I'm a woman and I'm, not white. That came later. Like later, when I was already doing well, I realized that it did matter. But at the time, I was so heads down saying, I got it. You guys want me to prove myself, and I'll do it. I'll show up. I'll work harder than everybody else. I'll have 2 kids and I'll commute. I'll support my husband, and he was, of course, super supportive. And I still tried to do everything right, and that's what I've always done. But you're right. So coming out of MBA, then ironically, I went back to the same companies, right? I was still living in Cincinnati. I went back to the same companies and said, haha, look, I have an MBA now, right? And the same company said to me, great. Why don't you apply for, in the cohort of your MBA class coming in, we start you at the bottom and you build your way up. And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, I just spent like a bunch of my money, and I spent 2 years. By the way, my high state experience was so amazing. I'm through and through a Buckeye. It did change my life. It gave me a perspective on business that I couldn't have gained otherwise. So it wasn't a waste of time. But the reasons why I did it were not real. It was a realization that I went down this path thinking I'm going to come back, going to get a high-paying job, and my husband and I are going to settle in Cincinnati, and we're going to have this amazing Midwest life where we're a mixed couple. There were also challenges at home. I didn't fit in my neighborhood. I was one of only 2 people who were not white in my neighborhood, and we were the only mixed couple. Turns out it mattered, And so I worked with Ohio State, and I said, find me a job. I don't want to start over from the bottom. And so I basically found my way into Midwestern Bank in Cleveland. It was ironic that my life always takes me back to Cleveland, which is where I met Bruce. And I convinced them to give me a VP of product job. And it's interesting, right? Because they compare, you take a pay cut when you go from California to Midwest. You don't necessarily get it back when you move back, which also experience. So I took a VP of product job. It was a new product. It was home equity. I said, all of my jobs, I look for a couple of things. I look for, is it stretching me in any way? Am I learning something new? Am I adding value, right? Am I truly an asset to them, right? And then is it keeping me on my path for longer term where I want to fill in all these buckets, right? I've done marketing, I've done analysis, I've now mastered finance through education, I hope. So product to me sounded interesting. Plus it was a brand new product for me, which is home equity line of credit. Previously, I'd only done credit cards, and I said, okay, well, my husband and I picked up, we moved to Cleveland. He decided to wrap up his job in Cincinnati and decided he will look for it. Like we kind of tried to take turns. And so I moved to Cleveland, and it was a good job, but it was a very different culture than where I grew up or where I worked at Pavilion, which was a meritocracy. People moved fast. This bank was really supportive. I don't think I was discriminated against, but I also didn't see a path. It was a very mature bank. There were, if you look at people at the time, I was still in my 30s, and you look at people who are in management, they were in their 40s and 50s. And also it was just a different culture, right? You were required to be in before 8, you could leave by 5. And I'm not used to that. I'm used to just doing whatever it takes. And as a new mom, I felt like, I could come in whenever because I don't care when I leave. I'll leave when I need to leave. Anyway, so I decided, that it wasn't the place for me. It was hard. I tried to make it work again. You have this vision of, I bought a house, I want to settle, I want to have a life where that doesn't involve a huge commute. And, you want all the bells and whistles. You want a nice house. You want to be able to have, dinner with your kids. But I was unhappy. I was unhappy because I knew I wasn't pushing myself. This was the first job where I felt like I'm not challenged. And I was challenged for the wrong reasons. And my husband was finding trouble getting the type of job he wanted. And then out of the blue, he got an offer out of Florida, his dream job. I was in my dream house, not happy. And we're like, you know what? It's your turn again. I will pick up and I'll move again. So by now we had our third kid. So I have the unique, also my kids, each of them born in a different state. It's pretty amazing. I moved again when I was 8 months pregnant and landed in Florida. My in-laws were there. We're like, okay, I love Florida. Reminded me of home. It's funny, like plants that you are familiar with in tropics, you can grow in Florida. I'm like, oh my God, this is like being home. I never want to move again. Florida doesn't have being said.
Can I ask a quick question? Because there's something there which ultimately doesn't fall into our subject, but it stayed with me when you said, when your husband got the opportunity in Florida, you said it's your turn now, again, right? So I think that in itself is something we could probably explore, but it's this mindset of an element of equality in the partnership, where you go, okay, you know what? Now I'm making a compromise. The next one, you're making a compromise, and it goes up and down. So I think it's just wonderful just to acknowledge, just hearing that, which is not necessarily obvious to a lot of people. So you're in Florida, you're feeling nice and warm and a little bit humid.
Yeah. And then my in-laws were there. I'm like, oh, finally a family close by. How amazing, There are no banks headquartered in Florida. There's a lot of money. The two main industries, there's a couple of main industries, right? There's tourism, there's wealth management, because a lot of retired people, and healthcare. Right? Those are sort of the pillars, I would say. I don't know if it has changed, but at least then that's what it was. And it was impossible for me to find a job again. And I'm like, oh my God, like how often? Like now I'm, almost 40. I've been working since my early 20s. And why is it that I'm still having trouble finding a job? And so this time it was more industry related. And so I applied for a senior manager job. And remember, now I've been VP on and off for like close to 8-9 years. I've been in, close to an executive management. And I found a job listing at Home Shopping Network. And I thought, what's interesting? They want to build a direct marketing. It was in the CRM team. And I said, I'll apply, right? I didn't want to stay home. I knew that staying home as a mom, it sets you back. Like you almost have to start over. And I felt like, okay, I need to keep working for my own sanity. But I did learn something. My first child, I went back in 6 weeks. I had deep regrets. For my second child, because I did the MBA, and so it kind of built in the 6 months between the time she was born and time school started. This one, I decided I'm just going to take 4 months off before I even look for a job. I'm just going to take the time off. So I started looking, applied to Home Shopping. To my surprise, they called me. And then I convinced the manager to hire me as a senior manager, even though I was overqualified, but pay me what I was getting paid in Ohio. Because I said, listen, I already took a pay cut going from California to Ohio. I don't want to take another deep pay cut. Just bring me in. I don't care about the title. I definitely don't want to keep climbing back up the same ladder. I took the job. And again, it was going to stretch me. I loved the job. It was like a totally different experience to be at a TV network. And it was like the personalities. And, I made a lot of good friends. My boss is now actually CEO of another company in the Bay Area. And I learned a lot. And quickly when I came in, once you become a VP and you're used to executing, you can put the genie back in the box. You can't go back to, I'm a senior manager, so I'm not going to do these things. So I started to lean in and make changes. And the person I just talked about being a CEO of another large public company now noticed. And he said, you know what? You're probably at the wrong level. I'm going to promote you to director, and I'm going to give you this task of building out a direct marketing program. And I did it. And the thing was, it created a lot of envy in the department. I got a lot of pushback from people who didn't know me, because when you apply for a job, people see you as that person. You apply for a senior manager job, they assume that's who you are. They don't see all of the history behind you, and I don't blame them for it. That's the thing, that my approach to life is, I try not to blame people. People are a result of their circumstance, and they just bring that to the table. It's not, I don't think it's super innate for them to say, I'm going to attack this person. That's my belief. I know there are some exceptions. I've learned recently there are a lot of mean people out there, but I bring that approach, right? So, but the bottom line was, after I hit a certain threshold, I hit a dead end, because when you're not part of the core business, your opportunities dry up after a while, because this is a TV channel, 2 billion in revenue. Me creating a direct marketing program that brought them 20 million in profits over a year, for me, it was like, oh my God, I did that. And for them, it was like, whatever, we'll probably cut your budget next year, because we don't. So then around this time, my husband's job, he got promoted, which is good news, but then he was told he's going to travel 100%. And I thought, okay, you're going to travel 100%. I have a job that's demanding. It's a dead end. I have now 3 kids, and my in-laws were helpful, but they're also older. So I'm just like, I'm back to the same place where, and also my kids had a lot of bullying because they're biracial at school. So the whole, in a mixed marriage thing was still a stressor. So I talked to my husband and I said, if you're going to travel 100% and I'm going to manage a job and 3 kids by myself, I'm going to go back to California. California is where I felt at home. I didn't have to answer questions like who I am, where I'm from, what are my kids? Like, this is a question they used to have, what are you? Like, the answer should be, I'm a human. But when a 6-year-old gets a question, she comes home and says, what am I? My friends are asking me what I am. So I told them it was yes about the career, but it was also about just saying, I need to remove these stressors that are outside of me. Like, they're coming at me and I don't have the patience to deal with it.
The word that comes to mind is safety, somewhere where you feel safe, right?
Yeah.
Because the stressors, they manifest in so many different ways, right? I mean, we sort of brush over things because the story still has so much more to bring, but I just want to take a moment just to reflect that what we're talking about right now is a situation where you have to think about your financial stability, but you also need to think about the well-being of your kids. And we're not even talking about your own well-being, because we were talking about like all of this you took in your stride, right? There's of course a lot of worries and anxiety and everything else built around that, right?
Yeah.
So you decide to move to California.
Yeah, and just I will give you a little teaser. The worst was yet to come. Right. So I know I'm not trying to be a hero here. I'm just saying I'm an ordinary person that got put through extraordinary circumstances, and I just had to figure out how to live through it, and that's really my story. So I called up, I found this company called Account Now. They were run by people I knew. It was basically ex-Providian folks. And I said, I feel at home with them. If I'm changing everything else, if I'm changing town, if I'm bringing kids without my husband being there every day, he's going to be only home on weekends, then I need to pick a job where I'm not for the first 6 months just trying to prove that I'm worth it. So I called them, I came and interviewed, they offered me a job. Even though I had left them as a VP, they would only offer me a director job. They had known me for 20 years. These are people I know, these are my friends. And they said, hey, you need to prove yourself to us again anyway. So I said, fine, I'll take a director job. At least I'm not sliding back into senior manager again. So that's how I started in prepaid. It's now become my mission. I think you know about this. I focus on financial inclusion, but that started with Account Now. And I'm so grateful I landed there. I do think universe watches out for you. I am so grateful I landed there, because inside of a year of being there, I was diagnosed with, stage 2B, which is close to stage 3 breast cancer. My husband was still traveling. My insurance was through him. So he couldn't quit his job. He couldn't be home on weekdays. And I had 3 kids, right? The kids were, if I remember correctly, they were 9, 6, and 2, right? So And I'm thinking, oh my God, like I turned 40 and my whole life, went to hell in a handbasket. And suddenly all of this fight I've had about how do I become a CEO? How do I fill out my experiences? How do I get over the fact that this guy used to be my boss, he was SVP and I was VP, and now he's only offering me a director job. Like the hurts that come with it, and the anxiety I had about, there were people who were my peers at Providian who were now running companies, and here I am in middle management. 10 years later, I left California as a VP, and 9 years later, I was coming back as a director. And it was hurtful. It was hurtful for me. I started to think about, is it because I put family first? Is it like, why is this happening? And I'll tell you, as bad as cancer is, and I know that a lot of people suffer, a lot of people don't make it. I made it. I look back, it was probably the best thing that happened to me, because suddenly you realize all of this other stuff, like, pardon my language, it's just bullshit. It is bullshit. Like, it doesn't matter. My kids didn't care what my title was. My parents didn't care what my title was. My husband just wanted me to survive. Like, it didn't matter. My career didn't matter in that moment because I was fighting for my life. And so I came out of that cancer, right? I managed somehow. My parents came to help. The reason I say I'm so grateful I landed where I did is because these were my friends. One of them took me to my chemo appointments. One of them watched my kids. I had support from work, from home. My parents moved in with me, and my husband did his very best to be there for me. And it was a very long journey. It took me a year and a half. It was a very aggressive form of cancer. And I came out of it and I realized that I was carrying so much in my head about how do I prove myself to this next person, to this next person, to this next person, that I forgot to truly go back to who I was. So I came out of cancer out of I couldn't control it. My brain was rewired from the chemo, and I came out with guns blazing. I said what I wanted to say. If I was told to do things at work that I thought were nonsensical, I told them, hey, it's nonsensical. I'm not going to do it. And suddenly people actually started looking at me as executive potential again, because I was no longer trying to fit into a mold to get my next promotion. I was just calling it like it was, because truly I didn't care about the title. And suddenly my ascent into executive management truly only happened after I came through on the other side of cancer. And I wish somebody had pulled me aside in Cincinnati or in Cleveland or in Florida and say, hey, yes, other people are holding you back, but so are you. You're holding yourself back. Because at the end, what people see is how you behave. And how you behave depends on how you feel about yourself, right? This confidence I have, Victoria's talking to you, I would not have had pre-cancer. Even now, I made the 50 over 50 Forbes list for finance. I still haven't posted it on LinkedIn because I'm still in disbelief that I made that list. So there's still stuff I have to do where I'm like, I should own my success. But it was eye-opening for me. Everything, it was just, and also when you feel like you're dying, which I was, you realize that you're going to come out of it and you're going to focus on what matters. And what mattered to me was being there for my kids. What mattered to me was being my true self out in society. Even if people hated me, I didn't care. And that not caring made me fearless. I do care. I'm a caring person. What I mean is, I didn't care how people viewed me. I no longer cared that people looked at me differently. I decided that it was them and not me. If they view me differently because I'm Indian and I choose to wear bindi and here's who I am, that's not on me, that's on them. And what I found was that I amazingly left Akana despite all their support, because I got a job where I was also in financial difficulty now. Remember, 2008 was housing crisis. I had my health crisis. I couldn't sell the home in Florida. My husband and I literally started over in our 40s. And so I got this job at Blackhawk as GM, actually as a VP, with a much higher salary. And I took it because I needed to dig out of these debts. I need to rebuild my savings, rebuild my retirement. Yeah, go ahead.
No, so sorry. You drop these things into a conversation and you go, there's a whole story just on that, right? Because the turbulences of the professional up and downs, the health up and downs, the financial up and downs, right? The being someone with no support, raising kids, quite isolated and all this. And then doing this as a woman of color. I'm just looking at this kind of bucket that's just filling with things. It's just difficulty after difficulty, and you're sitting there with a smile, and this confidence that you reference yourself, right? I do wonder, when you are in the middle of all of this, right? So it's 2008 and things look really bleak. Where do you draw your strength from? How did you actually kind of get up the next morning and go, I've beat the cancer now? Yeah, I don't even know how to phrase it, but where's the resource that just keeps you going?
So 2008 Christmas is when it was like my lowest, right? Because we had emptied our, I'm probably sharing a lot, but hopefully my husband's okay with it. We had emptied our retirement to pay for some of my treatment because he couldn't quit his job. We had all these complications. And then in December, as I was going through my chemo, I was at like the bottom in terms of my chemo treatment. And we did our taxes and we realized we had this huge penalty. Like we just realized we had this massive bill coming. And I thought, I'm on the verge of bankruptcy. Like I don't have the money. I am trying to put a brave face for my kids. We still have the Christmas tree. We still got them nice gifts, or not super expensive, but you try to be creative. And I remember sitting, and also the way chemo worked out, like I had a chemo scheduled on Halloween. I had a chemo scheduled on like the day after Thanksgiving, and I had a chemo scheduled on Christmas Eve. Like it just worked out so I was very sick for these days. And I remember sitting in my room. It was a rental house because obviously we hadn't sold a house in Florida. I couldn't buy anything. And I am brave and I'm smiling now, but I cried. I considered is my life worth it? Am I a burden to this family? Is me being around helpful, or is it now hurting them because of all these bills? And I made a decision, and right or wrong, right? Hopefully it's the right one, that I needed to be around for my kids. I decided in that moment that my husband is a good dad, but my kids need a mom, and I need to be around to make sure that they're okay. And so literally every day I would get up and I would say to myself, I can't believe I'm still getting emotional about it because I thought I was past it. I told myself, I'm not going to die today. I'm going to get through today, and I'm going to wake up tomorrow and deal with tomorrow. And amazingly, right? A lot of things happened. A lot of people supported. I ended up, there were friends and family who loaned me money, like got me through it, and I've been able to pay them all back. And I was on the other side. When I got the big offer from Blackhawk, I was on the other side. And it was really a day by day thing. And the second thing was, I truly believe, and this is, goes back to my religion and my faith. You are handed the cards you're handed. You can't, it's karma, right? I've earned it. There's a strong belief that whatever I'm getting, I deserve it because I did something somewhere to someone to earn it. So I just have to pay off this debt, whatever it is, whether it's physical, it's mental, it's financial. And my job is to just keep my head down, do my duties, which is being a mom, being a supportive daughter to my parents. My parents are now in the 80s and I take care of them. Like I'm paying them back by taking care of them. I decided I'm going to have all these buckets in my life where I'm going to do my very best for each of them. And I'm going to keep doing it until I'm either dead or I'm on the other side, And I've never, thank you for like asking me this question, because I don't think I've really gone into this with anyone. There were moments where I decided that this is my life worth, in the context of mental health, I probably should have gotten therapy, but I didn't even have time to get therapy because I was practically a single mom during the week. My parents were with me, but they don't drive. So I still had to do the shopping, etc. I had a full-time job and my kids were kind of in some sort of therapy through school. I was keeping their psyche together. I was making sure they knew that mommy's going to be around. I didn't complain in front of them. I did do some things. I didn't wear a wig. I decided everybody knows I have cancer. Everybody knows I'm bald. I'm just going to go to work bald. I went to business meetings with partners. I was bald. You get the sympathetic look and then they get past it. So yeah, I think it's a combination of faith and the strong belief that I need to be around for my kids. That was it. I think that's what got me through.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And actually, when you said maybe I'm oversharing here at the beginning, I think that's exactly what's important, because when you hear all these success stories and your story ends up being a success story, it's important to hear that things get dark and nobody ever talks about them. And that's one of the things that I'm really grateful that you shared this, because it means that even people who on the outside look perfect still have to scramble and still have to look at their tax bill and go, oh my God, how did that happen? What are we going to do about this now? So no, I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
So you're with BlackRock. Blackhawk.
Yeah.
Blackhawk. So well-paid job gives you an element of confidence that things will get better.
Yeah.
So what happens next?
Right. So then culturally, I knew I wasn't a fit for them. I knew that during the interview process. I said no to them 3, 4, 5 times, and they just kept upping the money. At some point, and by the way, it's not sick money, right? It's still, for me, coming up as a director, it was big money, right? Like breaking the 200 mark was a big deal. And eventually I was like, I'm just going to take it for the money. And I'm sure people listen to it, they'll be like, you get it. Culturally, it was a hard landing for me because, again, here I was in a company where the bread and butter was gift. They hired me because they knew my work at Account Now, and they said, she can fix it for us. Well, I came in, the product was broken. So I had to tell the SVP who hired me, I can't do what you want me to do because your product is broken. And then she said, well, if you're that confident, why don't you fix it yourself? And I'm like, sure, I'll do that. So I fixed the product. They said they're going to go hire a GM. They hired a GM. It didn't work out. I tried to be supportive. Eventually, I was like, it's my post-cancer candor came out. I was like, I can't work. So anyway, so they told me the reason they couldn't promote me is because I hadn't been supportive. It's fine. I didn't play politics the way I should have. But then I simply kept doing my job. For a moment there, for like a few months, there was no GM. I was a VP of product. All these people were dotted line to me. I started running the company, running my division as a GM. I showed them I hit the numbers. Christmas came around. I got a standing ovation from the executive team. And they said, all this time we've been looking around for a GM. You applied for the job. We said no to you, but you've gone and done it. You ran it as a GM. You earned it. And they put it in writing and said, we are promoting you to GM. You're now part of the executive team. And so what I realized was, despite all of the challenges I had where culturally I didn't fit in and I kind of rubbed people the wrong way, ultimately delivering on the results got me to where I wanted, which was, I always believed that to get to a CEO, you first, this whole thing about I want to be ready. I wanted to be GM, then I wanted to be COO, and then I was going to be CEO. This was my whole plan in my head. By the way, I never wrote it down. It's all somewhere in the back of my mind rolling around, right? So I was a GM. In 3 years after I became GM, I built them $1 billion prepaid business. Very few people had done. This was around the same time that Simple was sold for tens of millions of dollars. And I thought, look at me. I pushed myself inside a big company. I created a small business that I grew to $1 billion deposit business with a shoestring team. Nobody expected that. I was brought in as a defensive mechanism to keep the competitor out of their stores with the financial services business. Here I was making moves. I won a deal for T-Mobile, went up against every industry heavyweight and won the deal, delivered the deal, $500 million in deposits in year one. And I'm flying high and getting noticed by the CEO. I got promoted again. I mean, it was just amazing. I'm like, I have arrived. I'm past my cancer. I have arrived. Wow, I'm doing great. And then the company decided they didn't like my business. There was politics. I was wrapped up under my peer. I mean, he was there a longer time, so he never considered him my peer. That's fine. He and I are friends again. He pulled me under him because he really wanted, I think some of it was feeling threatened. Some of it was maybe logically it made sense. And then he didn't really like my business. So look, the story I've said publicly is that I parted ways. He fired me. He fired me because maybe he didn't like me. Maybe he didn't like the business. But every job I've left, when I left on my own, I made sure my team could run without me. They never have to replace me. That's what I did. I created $1 billion business. It was December 2014. I was out of a job again. And I had health challenges again. I didn't know whether my cancer was back. And I was stunned. I was like, hold on. I already hit bottom once. I'm supposed to be on the other side of it. I'm not supposed to have another bottom. Life's supposed to be like you hit one bottom and you're like, whoa, I'm done. Amazingly, just to close out on that story, he reached out to me like 9 months ago and said he apologized. He said he made the wrong decision. He was looking for a job. Will I help him? And I referred him to someone who was looking for someone just like him, and he had a job within a week. And he's been grateful. He's told other people I did this for him and that he apologized to me. So, it's all fine now, but the reality is that I hit another bottom where, again, there's financial uncertainty, right? I was still digging out of my debts, and what do I do now? But then I decided, as hard as it was, that rather than go for money, my lesson learned there was, you cannot, if you're going to create a lot of value, which I did, building $1 billion prepaid business in 3 years, nobody had done. If you're going to create a lot of value, you need to have control over the outcome. Otherwise, you should not be there. So in my next job, I decided, even though I'm in financially unstable again, I am going to work. I'm going to look for a startup opportunity where I have control over my destiny. I was very committed to it. And I have to say, this cannot happen without my husband and I really being in sync, right? He was saying, it's fine. You've suffered enough. Do what you want. We'll figure out the financials. And by now we had already bought a house. It's a different environment, right? Had to lean on friends again, or we had to be creative with our finances. But I ended up in this startup opportunity called Switch, where this person was introduced to me. He had this idea. He wanted somebody from the gifting business. 4 years at Blackhawk, I had 5 years at Blackhawk almost. I had absorbed so much of that business. I was able to help him build that product inside of 4 months, but I didn't negotiate enough. Another lesson learned for me. I wanted the startup opportunity so bad. He was willing to give me the COO title. He pushed me to help him fundraise the. So I didn't negotiate enough, right? He said, hey, if you help me raise money, I'll give you more percentage. So one thing I learned was all these people I graduated with who, remember, they all moved up beyond me while I was traveling the country with my kids. They were all millionaires. And I was able to raise over $1 million for this new company, like a pre-seed round. And I was like, wow, I can't believe I did that. I didn't know my network believed in me. And then amazingly, the percentage didn't show up. Like, I built the product with him. I asked for co-founder title. I was COO, so I got that, right? I wanted that. And my heart was not in it because now I had committed to focusing on financial inclusion. Gifting was a place I landed by happenstance with the hope that he's going to, I'm going to get paid what I want. I'm going to get substantial ownership. I worked around the clock because I was only one of 3 execs. It was just I learned a lot. I realized I could start a company from scratch and do it and build things from scratch, which I didn't know before. So I learned a lot, but I also realized that you need to bargain for what you want up front. No one's ever going to give it to you later unless you're willing to walk away completely. So I did that for a year and a half. And then around the time, by the way, my health challenge from 2015 resolved. It was not cancer, but I did go through major surgery in 2015. And this job I started after that surgery or during that surgery. And it's now a year and a half later, and it's 2017. And I had a new health challenge. Every time if you're a cancer survivor, every time you have a health challenge, you think it's cancer, and the doctors also have to think it is. So I went through a whole bunch of testing. My insurance was very flaky because I was in a startup. My husband had, during this time I was at Blackhawk and doing really well, he had transitioned to being a business owner. So we didn't have insurance through him. And I was just like, I need insurance. It's not even about the money. I need insurance, and I need to be back in a space where my heart says I want to be, which is financial inclusion. So again, I'll tell you, universe listens to you. I know some people don't believe it. I really believe that if you just really focus on it, it will listen to you. I got a call from a recruiter about Lindup and said, they're looking for a VP of data. And I was like, I said, I don't know how to do VP of data, even though I was analyst 25 years ago, but I want to talk to Lindup because they're in the space I want. My core competencies are lending and underserved. And this is a company that's figured out how to do it at scale. And I said, I want in, but not for a VP of data role. Like I told the guy, well, recruiters do what recruiters do, which is they want the commission. They put my name in for VP of data. And then the hiring manager called me. They set up hiring manager call. And the guy's like, listen, I really like you, but not for the VP of data role. I'm like, no kidding. So I ended up becoming a GM. I don't even think they had posted the job. They are just thinking about bringing in a new GM. And so it just happenstance, my resume came across. I was looking. I hadn't told my current boss I'm leaving. I had told him I was unhappy with the percentage, with everything. And then I was dealing with this health challenge. It was summer of 2017. That also resolved itself. It was not cancer. It was something else that, it's long-term health issue that I'm maintaining, probably from a side effect of the cancer treatment. And I'm like, it's fine. So I took the job as GM. They told me it was difficult. They told me that business was in trouble. They told me their focus was card. Card was the future. They need someone to come and problem solve for loans. And my point of view was, loans is what's your bread and butter. Loans is what is difficult to do. I've done cards before. I'm okay taking loans. You guys just focus on card because I've been there, done that. Yeah, and so I just was heads down, fixed a lot of things. I was very bold, right? By now I had evolved into so many different things I had become. I just came in and I called bullshit every day. I told the exec team they need to, by the way, I went back to being a GM. I was not a C-level, but it was a larger company. It was in the space I wanted. I said, I'll take it. I literally fixed, cut marketing budget by 90% my first month. I let go of my head of product in my first month. So I just came in and I said, this business needs cleaning up. I had a supportive boss who said, do what you need to do. And I went at it, 12 months later, the company was fundraising for card. It didn't go well. We ended up having to sell card. As part of that, the CEO is stepping down. And by now I had fixed the loans business to close to profitability. And so even though we couldn't fundraise, loans could stand alone and survive as a company. I'd done that in 12 months. And the outgoing CEO said, I think if company is going to refocus on loans, she should be the CEO. And not to bring irony or whatever it is, right, happenstance in, the day I found out I was going to be CEO was the 10th anniversary of me finding out I had breast cancer. So they pulled me into the office, my boss and his boss, who was the CEO, and said, we need to talk to you now. I actually thought I was getting fired because I'd been fired before. And they said, well, we're going to put your name in for CEO. It's not a done deal, but the board has to approve. And I just sat there thinking, there's something wrong with this picture. I'm still processing that today is the 10th anniversary, how far I've come, blah, blah, blah. And you're telling me this goal I had a long time ago, which I'd given up on when I got cancer, and not fully given up, but cannot stop thinking about it, is now happening. So that's my story on how I became CEO. I don't know how much more. Look, I have time. I can talk for another 20 minutes, but I just, my experience at LendUp for the past 4 years is its own book, right? I have a coach who told me that. I have 3 books in me.
I have a feeling because things are happening with LendUp, that we may just pause and revisit the conversation about LendUp in itself. Because I think it would also be nice as our audience gets to know you, for them to be curious about the next step. But I'd like to just kind of take a moment just to kind of acknowledge where we've landed, right? So we normally don't have a conversation with somebody where we just go, let's just go through your CV. But for you, your CV is the red thread of all the different ups and downs that people can experience. And you sort of touch upon these things just very briefly. I do think that we have a entire conversation about what it is to be a woman of color in business, right? And the fact that you weren't given the same chance that maybe other people would have been given purely in that, where you had to prove yourself and you had to wait all this time until you finally can get the recognition that other people might have got. I think this is, and again, is I have a slightly different lens. But I've been an immigrant all my life, so I've fought kind of the expectations of people or the assumptions that people are doing. Or I remember having had a conversation with somebody once who said to me, you can get fined this company if you tone down the gay thing, and all these beautiful things. So you realize, there's all these biases that people have, that this is not the right home for me. But it's also for me interesting to kind of dig back into a little bit what you said about how your resources to get through this were this intrinsic belief that you have just to plow through this, but also you mentioned your faith. And I find it really insightful, because in our conversation with founders, an element of faith or an equivalent of faith, but something that is deep values-driven beliefs has been helping them through it.
Yeah.
And I find it just beautiful how you articulated that in your way with being a Hindu and being very aware of the framework that it gives you, right?
Yeah.
I do think I'm getting excited by the idea of saying, let's end this on a cliffhanger, because I'd really want us to go and dig deeper into Lenda. I was curious, first of all, how you're doing now, how you're feeling overall.
Yeah. So I feel pretty good. I think I had, like you said, we'll leave it as a cliffhanger. I had four more tough years, but, rewarding in many ways. So it was both up and down. Sounds like that's my life, right? So I'm kind of starting to accept that. I'm doing good from just knowing that I'm doing the right thing. I would say the way to say it is my moral compass always points north, and I'm very confident in it. So when things happen that are not to my liking, I'm able to say, this too shall pass, or I'm going to do the right thing regardless of my personal outcome, because I still want to be me on the other side of this. I don't want to change who I am because I was chasing an outcome, Health-wise, I'm stable. I've had many challenges over the years. I'm learning to manage my health challenges. And I don't really talk about it. Like, my kids don't really think about the fact that I have some challenges. I take care of my parents. They're, like I said, my dad's almost 85. My mom's going to turn 80. They need a lot of help. So I'm juggling a lot. So COVID was hard because I had 7 people at home. It's a reasonable size home, but it's not huge. It's 2,500 square feet. We have enough rooms, but managing cooking with 7 people, managing a high-risk lending company through COVID, it's been a lot. So I would say that in the last 4 years, last 3 years as my CEO, I've learned a lot. As a CEO, I've become, one of my coaches said that in 3 years, I've gained the experience of 30 years as a CEO. So I think I've come out of it very seasoned and more mature. But I'm also very clear-eyed about what is it that I want in life and what I want my kids to take away from my life. I'm very clear-eyed about how talking about myself helps other people. I did one keynote for this women's conference a couple years ago, and I shared, it was only, you see I talk a lot, but it's like 35 minutes. I just give very high level view of what I just talked to you about. And I got a 5-minute standing ovation. And it made me realize that my story matters because it helps other people. And recently I made the Forbes 50 over 50 for finance. I haven't publicized it very much because I'm still processing it. I'm still I can't believe I made that. My goal coming out of this is to continue to be humble, because I don't know how much time I have. No one knows how much time they have, right? Like they say, the only thing certain in life are death and taxes. So my goal is just get through every day, do the best I can, and add value. I do know that I want to stay focused on financial inclusion. I want to make a global impact. So if anything, I would say coming out of all of this, I'm supercharged because I feel like I've figured out what I want to do. I've figured out what I can do. And I also know how to deal with difficulties at every angle in life. And I'm hoping that there's, hopefully divine intervention and universe will continue to support me. I actually feel very grateful for the life I've had, because I wouldn't say it's been a difficult life. I would say it's been an interesting life and something that really pushed me. Life has pushed me in every which way, and I'm still standing. And I think that's success in itself.
I know this was wonderful. I really, really appreciate you being so open, but also so articulate about your journey. And I'm already looking forward to the next chapter. I know we have a lot to explore, but for the moment, thank you so much for joining us. You've been listening to Naked by The Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. To learn more about our work, sign up to our newsletter or visit thefuturefarm.co, where you can also apply to be a Naked guest. And remember, subscribe, follow, and rate Naked to help share it with the world.